Hello and welcome back to another episode. Today I simply have to share with you this brand spanking new hobby art craft painting, drawing, sewing, modelling zone space alcove that we've created over the weekend. Obviously we're still trying to tie down exactly what we're calling it, but nonetheless I made this weekend and I'm very pleased with it, very proud indeed. This alcove is actually on the other side of the fireplace from the alcove where we installed a media unit last year. And really, ever since we've moved in, this space has always been, at least theoretically, about crafting and making and indulging in our hobbies. One of the first things we did to the house when we moved in, actually, was to install 3 shelves here to store my wife's sort of soft crafting materials, things like wool, cloth, sewing needles, knitting needles, the stuff that she uses quite frequently to make all sorts of stuff, decorations, gifts for friends, stuff for our godchildren, this sort of stuff. So it's always been about that, and at least in theory we always knew that we wanted to do crafting and hobbying here. In fact, just behind the camera there's a cupboard where we keep all our hard craft materials, card, paper, paint, high quality drawing pens, this kind of thing are over there. So this area has always been about that, but we were missing one crucial element, and that was a decent surface on which to work. When we moved in, we actually did have a surface that we put here, and that was a sort of a hallway table that used to be in the hallway in the flat where we used to live, and we thought it was going to work because it fitted quite nicely into the space. But almost immediately when we tried to use it, especially when my wife tried to use a sewing machine, for example, on it, it just wasn't working at all. First of all, it's quite low, especially since it has a drawer underneath the surface. It's really hard to get your legs underneath the table and actually get into a position that's comfortable for crafting and making, or for example feeding cloth through a sewing machine. Secondly, the surface of that surface was a bit bubbly. The varnish had reacted badly with the wood or something, and there's a couple of spaces where stuff would just get torn or caught on the flake of the varnish, and it was never really working out. And so over the past couple of years, life and busyness, this area just became a place where we just dumped stuff, and especially dumped more balls of wool, or crafting projects that were half done would just pile up here onto that table. It just wasn't satisfactory. But inspired by our success with the media unit last year, early this year we resolved to start doing other things around the house, and starting with this area here. So we did. We popped out on Saturday to a local lumber yard, a reclamation charity, not-for-profit organisation, where you can just turn up, have a browse in the lumber yard, and hopefully find something useful for the project that you have in mind. One thing that you're guaranteed, whether you find exactly what you're after or not, is that you're going to find wood that has character, that's been used for something else up until fairly recently, and that's something that we both actually find quite appealing. And what we settled on Saturday was a medium-sized pine wardrobe door. Pine effect in places. You see the frame actually was hardwood, but the centre panel of the door was actually pine veneer MDF. But that's no bad thing for my purposes. It all works beautifully. But it's one of those things where I suppose that's the downside of getting a composite item that has been a wardrobe until a few days ago, is that no one really knows exactly what goes into the making of that wardrobe. But ultimately, it's a great place and we're very happy to support it. So that was Saturday morning, but already by lunchtime this space was starting to take shape. I began by chopping the hardwood frame off the wardrobe door and using it to create the frame, the skeleton for this alcove space. By running wood along the sides of the alcove and along the back, it was quite straightforward to make a nice flat lip of wood for the desk to rest on. And that's actually a skill that I'm quite comfortable with. I a couple of years ago really perfected that when we installed a closet space in one of the bedrooms upstairs. And as far as drilling these walls go, I got a lot of experience doing that when we installed the media unit. So I was quite comfortable and quite quick putting that together. But what slowed me down a little bit was installing the surface itself, this desk surface, because nothing in this house is remotely square, and this is not a rectangle. It's rectangle-ish, but it's not a rectangle. So I had to find a way to make that shape without driving myself crazy. And when it came to the closet a couple of years ago, when we installed that, I did almost go crazy just by trimming off a bit here and there until eventually the thing fitted in place. But recently I learned a very funky little tip from a carpenter friend of mine. He suggested making a template by taking smaller pieces of wood, and I was using some old slats, wooden slats from an old office window blind, to run along the back, the sides, and across the front. Glue them in place with hot glue, and you get that space created, that shape formed for you out of those 4 pieces of slat wood. So actually, this did slow me down, but only because I had to make the template first and then draw it onto the wood and then cut it out. So you know, I don't know, by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, this was more or less in place. So it was all coming together quite nicely. But the next phase was crucial. You see, I wanted to add a certain functionality to this space that I've always wanted in my life, but I've never really had the opportunity to create. You see, this desk space has to function for various purposes. It has to work as a place where I can paint Warhammer 40k models of my Space Marines and Plague Marines here. It has to work as a space where the sewing machine can be set up, a nice flat area unencumbered by too much clutter. It has to work as a space where we can do other crafts like decoupage or collage, or you know, stuff involving a magnifying glass like soldering, this kind of thing. But I've always wanted a place where I could do drawing and painting and dot to dot, even colouring in, that was a bit like an easel, a bit like an architect's professional desk. In other words, a space where the desk slanted towards the artist like this. And I'm so pleased that we managed to achieve this. Now this was a delicate operation because the surface here was still essentially floating loose, and it was all one piece of wood at that point. So with the help of my amazing wife, we installed the front edge of the frame, and then carefully decided where we wanted the desk to be in relation to that frame. We decided on a sort of a 4mm gap eventually, using these beautiful hinges. You might recognize these from when I made the DM screen for my previous dungeon master. Sadly, she's moved back to Canada recently and couldn't take the DM screen with her. So I've repurposed these hinges for this purpose, and I love these hinges, I really do. But a key decision we had to make, though, was where we were going to cut this desk, not in half, but you know, maybe 2/3 or 1/4. You see, we wanted a space here where things could still rest flat while this area was tilted towards us. This had to accommodate maybe the sewing machines sideways on, things like paint boxes, or my Thanos mug here with the paintbrushes in it, beautiful. And so we had to just feel that out. It wasn't something that I could design without seeing it and feeling it, and there's also consulting with the other person who's going to use this desk. So we decided on a 25 to 30 centimeter flat space here, and a space here that crucially could accommodate an A3, at least A3 sketch pad. And actually that sits there really very easy. I could go even bigger than A3. We will be able to bulldog clip paper to the top of the desk like that, but also actually the hinges act as a stop for paper slipping off the desk as well. It's surprisingly elegant, and I'm really pleased with that aspect of this desk. Obviously I cut a nice little hole here as a handle, and in fact as a sort of a a side effect of the design. We actually ended up with two different heights that the whole thing tilts to. The initial design actually involved the legs coming up and actually resting on the back runner against the wall there. That's one angle, and then the second angle is achieved by the fact that the legs have a crossbar that rests on a piece of wood underneath the desk here, that's designed to keep the legs folded under the desk when the whole thing folds down. But actually, a bug which became a feature of this design was that the legs rest quite happily on that bar, so we have this second slightly less acute angle that the desk can rest at. And then when we need a flat work surface once more, all we need to do is pull up, encourage the legs forward underneath, and the whole thing rests flat back in its starting position. I could not be more pleased with how this project has worked out, not least because it's finally here, you know. I mean, we've had this notion of a crafting zone, a model area, an artist's area in the living room ever since we first moved in and we've installed those shelves in the alcove, but finally we've managed to make something that will work for all of those different purposes, and that it just feels right. I mean, last night I was laying out my 40k models in a well-lit area, and I wasn't in anyone's way. My lovely wife was sat on the sofa reading her Kindle. If she was watching the TV, the light, for example, wouldn't be disrupting that. This just works, and I'm so pleased that we finally got it up and running. And hopefully this will be the beginning of a year of doing little things like this around the house, just to make all these little ideas come to life. These notions that we've had over the past few years finally coming into reality. It's just so exciting. I'm really pleased about it. I suppose a couple of thoughts though. One final thing that I suppose I'd like to fix about this is that closing action. At the moment it does require two hands to close. It'd be nice if it was a one-handed closing action. I'm not sure how I'll achieve that, but I'm sure that's possible. And also, you'll be relieved to know that the whole thing is supported by a rather thick chunk of wood, actually an offcut from one of the scaffolding planks that we use for the media unit underneath here. So where the desk is cut into those two pieces, there's a big piece of wood under that supporting it. There we go, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this or found it interesting, but at the very least, hopefully in the near future, or at some point in the future, we'll be able to do some modelling videos here, and maybe some other fun art stuff as well on camera. I'm just so excited that it is here, and it looks and works exactly as I hoped it would. It's brilliant. As ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye bye.